I'm Jim Collison from Gallup. We're here at Heartland Developer Conference 2014 here in Omaha, and I am here with Robert. And Robert, I'm going to bail on your last name. Boedigheimer.
Boedigheimer,
right?
yes,
This
very
is
good.
what that is, Robert. Take a few minutes, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, where you're from, those kinds of things,
Okay.
so we can get to know you a little bit.
I'm a full-time web developer, so I work for Schwann Shared Services. I've been doing that for about 23 years. I've been doing web development for about 20 years. I do conference
Has the web
speaking.
been around that long
The web
already?
has been around that. I got in very early, so yes.
Impressive, yeah,
yes.
early 90s.
Yep, and I'm a Pluralsight author, so I've been doing that for about the last
how many
3
of those
years.
do you have?
I've got 7 courses on Pluralsight.
Great.
And been doing conference speaking. I've spoken at every HDC.
Okay.
So this is my 11th year.
You're not going to miss.
This is my very first conference too.
What is it
HDC.
What is it about the conference that you enjoy? I mean, what about the experience that keeps
I like
bringing
it
you back?
because you get a lot of good interaction with people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's lots of chances for me to meet with people, talk afterwards, and just go through questions. And I always find I learn a lot when I speak as well. So no matter what the topic is, there's always somebody that says, you could do this. That's something I hadn't considered before.
Do they come to you afterwards and say those things?
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they'll say, raise their hand and say you could do this as well. So I kind of like it if they say it during, because then you can share with other people.
Yeah.
And you get some exposure to
You're
that,
the
so.
second speaker today that's told me that. That's like, I learn as much by giving the session as I do by hearing them.
Absolutely.
And from that standpoint, so that's kind of a good thing to keep in mind as you're given those. Tell me a little bit. Certainly, you've seen the web change just in the last 20 years that you've been doing this. What's the biggest surprise that you might have, in your career? Where have we gone that you didn't see it coming, and you were like, wow, I had no idea this was going to happen?
Well, back then, mobile devices.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the device proliferation recently has been probably the biggest surprise to me. Because before I could focus just on desktop, certain size, a very limited number of operating systems. We always fought through browser wars of things being different that you had to deal with, but it's much worse now than it was before.
Yeah, I remember the days you had to test, like I think IE3 and 4, and you had some other browser versions in there, and Chrome didn't even exist.
Right, yep.
Isn't that crazy?
Netscape and all the other ones.
Yeah, exactly. And so you'd create this app or whatever, you'd create this website, and then you'd have to test it on every single different browser to get.
So I think that's been one of the biggest surprises. And then HTML5, CSS3, just a lot of the capabilities they've added in the last few years, the things that we could have never done before. Yeah.
When do we close the door in HTML5 and start working on 6? I mean, how is that going to work? Because that 5 standard has been out and open, and they still continue to add things to it, right?
Yep. And
when do we
it kind of
close that?
depends. So W3C and the WhatWG group have kind of been together, been not together. The WhatWG considers it just to be an active document.
Okay.
So they figure they don't even want to call it HTML5. They're just going to keep adding to it. And since they've split it into separate modules, it's very easy to, like, geolocation works very well, and it's well supported. So we use it on websites to pinpoint where you're at, so you can find stores near you that sell our products, things like that. And they'll keep adding ones, and browsers will adopt them. So I think it's just going to be a continuous. I don't know that they're even going to label it 6 or 7. I think they're just going to keep coming out with, here's a new enhancement. It's implemented by a lot of browsers.
Yeah, so maybe it ends, maybe that naming convention kind of ends with where it's at today. We don't see that.
Right. Well, the W3C wants to keep it going, but what WG is saying, we're just not going to attach numbers anymore. So I think they are saying there'll be a HTML6 sometime in 2015. I think is the last time I heard. But for me, I really don't focus as much or care on the numbers. I'm obviously focused on. We run an e-commerce site, so I've got people coming with all sorts of devices. I care about when are those devices supporting a given feature that I want to use, and then I don't really worry about the rest as far as when the ink is dry on the standard. I'm glad they do the standards, so the browsers do things the same way, but past that it doesn't really concern me.
Kind of functionality for you. Web versus native functionality, especially that's got to be important in your world as we talk about, do we go full web functionality? Do we got to write an app, for that? Where are you at in that space?
I'm a web developer, so I come at it from the standpoint of, unless I need to use native capabilities on the device, I want to do it web-based. I get a lot better reach with that. I don't have to target a lot of new devices. I don't have to learn new techniques.
Right.
When it comes to needing to leverage something that's native, then you could look at using a hybrid.
Okay.
So you can take advantage of everything you know for web.
Talk about hybrid for the person who doesn't know.
Yeah, so the idea with a hybrid is basically it's mostly written in web, but it's put into a native app shell that allows you to kind of have a shim to get to the native API and capabilities. So there's tools like PhoneGap and tools like those that allow you to gain access to those native capabilities in a way that you can do cross devices. So, and that's what I focus on. I mean, I'd rather invest in continuing to use the web, have it run everywhere, and the few places I need native to consider hybrids rather than pure native. But
do you find what are the few things left that you can't do that you got to go back to the native stuff for what you do?
For what I do, we haven't had to do it yet, but if I wanted to do barcode scanning, so for instance, if a customer said, you know, I'm out of this given food now, I want to reorder it again, I could let them just scan that barcode and add it directly to their cart. That would be something that today is kind of iffy from a web perspective, but you can gain access to with native. So camera functionality.
Yeah, hardware, is it kind of some of it kind of hardware centric, or is that a wrong assumption?
The specific things that rely on the hardware of that device that are usually not present on desktops is kind of
because that would be every browser would have to have its own pieces for that device and that OS and those kinds of things.
But something like geolocation is cool because it happens to, on a mobile device, it will use your GPS if you have one. And if you're not and you're on a desktop, it's going to use your wireless, your IP address. And so that's functionality that all the web browsers can get to. So I think they're more and more trying to bake the native stuff into browsers, but we're always going to be slightly behind as they add something new to native, and that's where the hybrid stuff could make sense.
Do you find with what you do that iOS or Android any different? Are they kind of come on an equal footing at this point?
For us, it seems to be about an equal footing. So
not too much difference between the two, and they've kind of seemed to mature out. And have you done much Windows Phone? Have you looked at Windows Phone?
I have not done much with Windows Phone. So.
Talk a little bit about your session here. What are you hoping to get across? It's coming up tomorrow. Talk a little bit about what you're hoping
to. It's at 11:15 tomorrow. It's on jQuery fundamentals. So we're just going to go through. About a third of it is just covering the basics of jQuery for people who haven't used it at all.
Good. Okay.
How do you set it up? What version do you want to use? jQuery has actually broken they've deprecated some features in newer versions. So you have to kind of worry about if I have a lot of plugins already that I take advantage of. How do I deal with that? They've got to migrate plugins. So I'm going to go through those examples of how do you choose the right version. The version's also split based on what version of IE you want to support. So their 2.0 branch said we don't care anymore about IE 8 and below. Some websites, mine, I still have to support IE 8.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, so then I would go down the 1.9 sort of fork instead. So I'm going to cover those differences. Talk about if you have plugins that break from deprecated features, how do you use the migrate plugin. So that's kind of the beginning part of the talk. The middle is kind of a lot of different plugins you can use. So we found a lot of good use of off-the-shelf plugins that somebody wrote for us to give us very advanced UI functionality in the browsers without us having to write a lot of code. So we use a lot of those. So I'm going to go through some common popular plugins, how to use them, why you might use them. And then at the end, I'm going to go into a lot of tips and tricks about specific jQuery things that an intermediate or advanced person might not be aware of. So we've done, if you've been to websites that say, hit the button, but don't hit it twice because evil things will happen. You know? We actually have it where if you try to double click, as soon as you click, we use animations and hide the button so you can't get a double click. So we talk through how to do that so you don't need to warn the customer not to double click, because you'd be surprised. I sit over a lot of people's shoulders. Web's been around a long time, but they still want to double click everything. So
I just renewed my my vehicle registration for the state of Nebraska. And that I clicked to buy it, and sure enough, it's like, big warning signs.
Don't do it again.
Don't do it. We may double, charge you or whatever. But so that's great.
So we've got some just helpful tips on things like that we've run across. Stop people from stealing your images, things like that. So just simple techniques and show them how to do that kind of stuff.
Do you have that problem, people stealing your images?
For us, no. But I know people that have, and we're not. There's a lot of ways people can steal them. We do the basic stuff about how to shut off right click so people can't do a save as. So, for instance, so my mom can't steal your images.
Or me. I do that from time to time. I'll want, I get this, and I know I could probably go do something different, but it's just so easy to Google it and find it, and it works well. I always figure if I'm stealing the image of someone who's trying to sell something, it's in their best interest probably to have it out there anyways.
And most of the image besides stock images aren't an issue.
Yeah. It's usually techy gear, you know, that.
So that's kind of the third part of the talk is just tips on things like that people might not have run across that are really easy to do in jQuery. So
yeah, you know, you mentioned when we first started talking, you know, you started in web, screen sizes were much smaller. They've gotten ridiculous in size now too, right? All the way, so I mean, some really large screen resolutions. And at the same time, we now struggle a little bit with tablet and phones. Is that, I mean, as a web developer, is it just a nightmare to try and figure out the right resolution, for all those different sizes, or is it getting easier to dynamically change that?
Well, I think there's a lot of good frameworks to do responsive web design, which we've been doing recently.
Yeah.
So with the frameworks, you do have to design 3 times.
Right.
I mean, today you say phone, tablet, desktop. What do you want them to look like? You've got to do that design work to figure out what they look like, but at least the frameworks make it pretty easy to put together the markup, and it automatically adjusts. So things like CSS3 media queries can detect the width of your device, and so then they properly will shut off things. Or, for instance, I was working this morning on some navigation. On a tablet, I can have a normal navigation bar like you would expect, but as soon as you get down to the width of a phone, it becomes more of a drop-down or the hamburger icon, those kind of things. And there's actually a lot of support built into frameworks to do that today, so that's actually gotten easier, but the designers do have to deal with, how do I want this to look on at least 3 different form factors? And
are there more?
Oh, certainly, yeah. Okay. Some of the bigger TVs, if you want to support that and really want to have a different experience, there's a whole, you know, from small to very large if you want to do that.
Yeah, I as a user, I wasn't aware of that. You know, I was messing with a site, and a buddy was walking me through it, and he was like, you know, drag, boom, and then you'll see it switch, and you see it switch. Yeah. And so we were testing some WordPress themes that had responsive design in it. And some of them weren't getting it right. You know, you would switch, and you knew it needed to switch.
It's a little wonky.
Yeah, you know, you'd be like, because that's got to be a challenge, right? You've got to get those CSS for each one of those sizes.
Yeah, they kind of call them different design breakpoints, and you have to accommodate. And you know that within phones, there's still a pretty good variation as well. So they've still got to be fluid designs even within the phone that you do. So it's more work, obviously, than when we started.
Yeah.
But it's gotten a lot easier the last year than it was just before that.
And it's gotten easier because
the frameworks
are better.
Yeah.
But just people are able to respond to them, and they're writing better software for them.
Yeah.
Do you end a tablet at 7 inches when you think when you're thinking about design? Is it 0 to 7 as a phone, and then 7 to 12 as a tablet, and then?
Yeah, I don't know that I have any specific sizes. We do it more by pixel based, and so we do, you know, this width up to
that makes sense,
600. Right. And then from 600 to 1024, it's just short of that, or tablet.
It's got to be crazy for you with all these different, I mean, the screen sizes today are more than they've ever been.
Yeah.
When we think about and varying devices, and even just what Microsoft is doing with Windows Phone, Windows RT, Windows 8.
Yep.
That's just, you just got to respond, you know, to all those things.
But that's also my argument for why I do it web-based.
Yeah.
Because, you know, on our website, I've ordered from my Xbox 3 different Android tablets, 2 different iPads, an iPad mini, Android phones.
Yeah.
I mean, the web works everywhere, so that's why I want to embrace that.
In this space, are you a gadget guy as well? Do you get into the gadgets? Sometimes I talk to developers.
I have a lot of them.
Do you like it though? Is it a space you like being in? Do you enjoy messing with them? I know you gotta work with them, but is it a natural? Would you own them if you weren't a web developer?
Yeah, I don't know.
Not all of them, of course.
Not,
you know
not as many, probably. I mean, I have a lot more than I need just because I need to test it in a lot of different places. But
it's there's just so many out there today. If you're a gadget guy, there's lots of opportunity out there for you.
Yes, there is.
As you look ahead to the future, and we've looked back a little bit as where web's come from. As you look at it, and it's hard to look ahead another 20 years, but as you look at the next couple of years, what kind of technologies are you excited about that you're anxiously awaiting to come, to get here, to get mature, that maybe we're still struggling with?
Yeah, I think giving a lot more of the native capabilities to the browsers is what I would be excited about. I mean, the more of that we can bake in, that I can count on being available across different systems. We started using Modernizer, which is a JavaScript framework that tells me if your browser supports a feature or not. Okay. So I don't have to look at the big database of what your device is and what does this support, I can just use something like Modernizer and say, I know that you support this feature, so I can use it. So the more features that are available to web browsers and not forcing me to go into native, that's what I'm excited about in the future.
And certainly there's a difference between that browser, let's say that Chrome browser that's running on my phone and that Chrome browser that's running on my PC. How far apart are those from a development perspective?
They're pretty similar.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing, I use caniuse.com as a good website to look up. So I'll evaluate like geolocation. I'll go out there and see, and they have a nice grid of how well is geolocation supported across all of these different browsers on different devices and such. So that gives me an idea if that feature is there or not. But there's really, once they're standardized and baked in like that, I don't have to do a lot of specific coding for the Chrome browser versus, phone versus desktop. It either supports geolocation or it doesn't. So luckily I don't have to do a lot of tweaking per device.
Yeah, and that's what's happening when I get a notification we'd like to use your location.
Right.
That's the browser saying, like, you would like to have it, so you're asking me if you can have permission.
Right.
And I assume that's at a session level, right? That's just for me, boom, my device.
Yep, so on that particular device now, you've given me the okay. I can either find out where you are right now, or you can actually watch as they move as well. So if that's advantageous from a web development standpoint, I could see that you're traveling as well.
Yeah,
so.
I want to shift the questions just a smidge. We get, because Jody and I do a lot of recruiting, we do it on college campuses. One of the things we notice, we're not seeing a lot of JavaScript development or a lot of JavaScript teaching going on in the university setting. If there was someone, maybe they're, they could be just in college thinking about it, or maybe they're a developer and they want to get more JavaScript, what would you recommend to them to get started? I mean, how does a person, which maybe they haven't done any web development or JavaScript stuff, what's the best way to get started with that?
So as I said, I'm a Pluralsight author. So we'll start there. I mean, that's where I train too. I mean, that's one of the advantages of being an author. I have access to the entire library. But it is really a reasonable cost even for students. And there's a lot of different ways people can get it through their companies and such. But either that, I think that's a good way to learn. You get a lot of visual. If that's the way you like to learn, that's a great way to do it. And it's available anywhere you want to learn. Otherwise, I've just grabbed a lot of books. So Douglas Crawford has really good books on JavaScript. Other people, that's where I would usually start.
Yeah, and you can learn that way. Just pull a book out and.
Yeah, I mean, I like both of them. I mean, I still like to carry physical books with me while I travel. I read on things, but I also like to use the online training as well. So kind of the mixture works out well. How
does one become a Pluralsight instructor? You're the second or third one I've interviewed over the years. And I think Michael Crump is one of those, and he speaks here all the time as well. What's the process for that? How do you get involved in that?
So the way I got involved, I happened to be speaking at a conference in London, and one of the other Pluralsight authors happened to be sitting in and came up and said, we don't have a course like this. Would you be interested in being an author? And that's kind of how I got involved with it.
How long does it take what's it take to put one of those together?
A while. I would say probably a solid month to 2 months where I'm doing the content. Kind of depends on how far I am already. So one of my talks is one of my courses is on web performance. I've talked about it at conferences for years, so I've already got kind of the bulk of the content done. Then it just takes me either weeks to a month to try to put that into an actual course. Do the recording, do the editing.
And you do all that.
I do all that
You're
myself.
Responsible to do that yourself.
Correct.
Buy a microphone, get all the stuff set up.
Record at home. The guy next door shingles that day, so that's
it always
works that way.
Anytime I'm interviewing somebody on a podcast, the tree trimmers show up. And they haven't been there in 5 years.
That's about how it works.
They're cutting the trees down, and you're like, what? How does that work, right? Yeah.
So I'm literally just got a microphone, doing my recording, doing my editing, submit it, gets reviewed, and then they put it online when they're comfortable.
Do they pay you per view, or how does that work? What's
so
the compensation
it's a mixture
model?
Royalties.
Okay.
Yeah.
So very cool.
Yeah.
It's a good. I wouldn't say it's open source learning in a lot of ways, but it kind of in the sense that they have built the infrastructure and then they hire freelance educators. Nobody's making full time.
There are a few.
Are there?
Yeah, there are a few that do it full time.
Just got that. They just want that much punishment in their life. There's a lot of work that goes. I don't think people realize how much work goes into those Pluralsight.
Yeah, there's a lot of background work.
How much time do you spend preparing? Certainly, you're probably speaking on something you've talked about. But when you're getting ready to do something for the first time, how much time do you spend getting ready for
Months.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's usually when I have a topic I've got some experience with already, like jQuery we had used. but then I also want to go out and add a lot more, just because, as I said, I'm a full-time web developer. What I use of jQuery is going to be this amount. Other people may have different needs, so I try to cover the whole thing. Wow. So I mean, again, it's usually months the first time I do it.
Yeah, well, it sounds like people are pretty lucky when they come into your session, because you probably prepared for a lot of different contingencies.
That's what I try.
Not just the I'm going to give you my slides.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. No, very cool. Anything that I might have missed that we should cover just in the last minute that I got with you? Did I ask all the right questions?
You asked all the right questions.
That's good. It's always, for these, we really come at it pretty raw, and I never know where the conversation's going to go, but I appreciate you taking a few minutes to sit down with me again, and good to have you back, and we'll probably see you next year if you
hopefully
you don't miss these.
I don't miss these.
So we'll have Robert's information down below that he'll want to share with you, anything, links and stuff. They'll be on the YouTube video. They'll be right below in the metadata section down below as well, and you can click on those as well. We want to thank you for listening, and Robert, thanks for coming out. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.